The young fight fans of today may not know who he is, but there was a time when the featherweight division was ruled by one British boxer named Naseem Hamed. Hamed was easily one of the most exciting fighters we have ever seen, lightning quick and highly skilled. Not to mention the man oozed charisma and knew how to market himself as a fighter, making him one of the most infamous fighters of all time. Even if you may not know who he is, you may know a whole bunch of fighters he influenced, who modeled their own styles on him, like Conor McGregor, Israel Adesanya, Tyson Fury, and Floyd Money Mayweather, to name a few. Despite all this hype, however, Naseem Hamed is almost always described as one thing: wasted potential. What if we told you this amazing fighter, who could have been one of the best ever, had his career ended by just one fight? Today, we'll be talking about the fight that essentially ended and buried Naseem Hamed's career. Before we get to the meat of the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more videos on the coolest sports content. By all considerations, Naseem Hamed was at the top of the world of boxing, coming off his 15th title defense, which he defended in absolutely legendary fashion. Naseem Hamed defends his title against Augie Sanchez, famous for being the last fighter to beat Floyd Mayweather, albeit this was during his and Floyd's amateur fighting career. Naseem Hamed was in his late 20s, was just coming into his prime as a fighter, going in and ended up with an absolute bomb of a punch that ended the fight in the fourth. Hamed showed that he was not slowing down and that he was still at his best. He was simply at the top. After the fight, though, it was revealed that Naseem Hamed had absolutely shattered his left hand. This left hand of Naseem Hamed has been continuous ever since his first title win against Steve Robinson for the WBO championship. The journey after this fight was a long one, as Hamed had to take time off as he had surgery done to fix his hand and had to rest up, in which he was also out of the gym, gaining weight and being out of fighting shape. Naseem Hamed's next fight was already lined up by the WBO, as they were assigning a mandatory fight for Hamed to defend his WBO belt. Hamed was set to fight a relatively unknown fighter who, despite being the European Boxing Union champion and #1 WBO title contender, has flown under the radar: Esteban Kovac. Naseem Hamed, however, as a natural showman, was aiming for only the biggest and most marketable fights. Naseem Hamed wanted a super fight, so Naseem Hamed went as far as to relinquish his WBO belt and went on to set up a fight against Marco Antonio Barrera for the IBO World Featherweight Championship. Marco Antonio has made a name for himself for his lightning-quick attack, and people are hyped to see these absolutely talented fighters duking it out. In the 8-week prep before the fight, Marco Antonio Barrera trained like an absolute madman. According to a statement from Sky Sports, almost everyone said Marco Antonio Barrera was training like a monk, fully focused and undistracted. On the other hand, when people watched Naseem Hamed's last 2 weeks of training, people were not expecting a good outcome for him. Hamed was not taking his sparring seriously at all, and not to mention, Hamed was coming off a long time out of shape away from the ring. The whole fight was a worrying sign for Hamed. Despite the worries, however, because of his undefeated record and because of his general level of skill, Hamed still entered the fight as a 3-1 favorite.
Just waiting in, and he's making him. You got to work on home. Police officer put his hand on the fight.
The fight began in the MGM Grand Arena on April 7, 2021, and from the get-go, it was clear Hamed wasn't in the best shape, while Marco Antonio Barrera was in the best shape of his career thus far. Naseem Hamed was a power puncher who chose his hits and went for devastating knockouts, while Marco Antonio Barrera was one of the most textbook, technically sound boxers of all time. Hamed kept trying to go for strong power punches, but these punches all went and whiffed, while Barrera continued to counter with quick combos and technique. Naseem Hamed kept loose with his guard, while Marco Antonio was tough as nails and was just an unbreakable fortress. No matter what kind of unexpected punch Naseem Hamed tried to pull, Marco Antonio Barrera was simply unmoved, unfazed, and unbeatable. Hamed kept trying to stay loose and counter, but he was simply too slow and out of shape to dodge Barrera's bullet punches, much less actually counter them. Naseem even had some weird antics, like that time he lost balance in the clinch and instead of taking a knockdown, grabs hold of Barrera and takes him down on the canvas with him. Naseem was also whiffing a lot on his power shots, making him unable to truly make any huge dents in Marco Antonio Barrera. His signature bag of tricks, trash talk, and showboating simply did not faze Barrera and his extreme focus. Naseem Hamed almost won this fight actually, albeit it would have been from an unsatisfying disqualification, as Marco Antonio Barrera counters Prince Naseem's wild hook by putting him in a hold and driving him into the ring post. In the end, even with the deductions from that move, Barrera still wins this fight by unanimous decision, winning the championship and most importantly giving Prince Naseem his first career loss.
When you lose a point and you win the round,
no argument, no. The guy boxed well, he boxed as best as he could, which paid off. He used his boxing skills.
After the fight, and the critics against Naseem Hamed were clear. He was sluggish and his style was ineffective if boxers stayed unbothered by his taunting. These critics on Naseem's game were always there, but they started to hold weight once Naseem actually suffered a convincing loss like he did against Marco Antonio Barrera. After what was almost a whole year of hiatus after his loss to Marco Antonio Barrera, Naseem Hamed made his return to the ring in his own country against EU champion Manuel Calvo. The well-loved fighter was booed by almost 10,000 spectators at this fight, as he simply was nowhere near the level that was expected of him. He was slow, sluggish, and looked far different from the Prince Naseem that once knocked opponents out with quick power and flash. It was clearly a disappointment for his fans, as the win felt undeserved, and as it felt like Naseem did not recover or improve at all during his hiatus to get back into shape. The fight was one that went all 12 rounds, but Naseem clearly was still not at 100%, and despite the win, it was just not what was expected of the fighter. Despite the win, Naseem promised a quick return to boxing after this fight, a return that just never actually materialized.
Pick up my head. I was that tired, and I was thinking I was fighting the world's best the day after. I'm surprised that I actually went 12 rounds.
Although even after years out of the ring and multiple rumors of his return, the fight against Manuel Calvo marked the end of Naseem Hamed's career. Naseem Hamed went on to say that his own personal reasons for the early retirement were the aforementioned issues with his hand and simply breaking down from wear and tear. However, it is also speculated that Naseem also retired because his signature style of taunting his opponent and then countering with heavy punches was basically solved by Marco Antonio Barrera, who had shown how to counter Naseem Hamed's style, making the blueprint for beating him clear. To this day, the fight between Naseem Hamed and other opponents is still considered one of the best ever, even if it marked the end of Naseem Hamed's career. His win over Naseem Hamed is still considered one of Marco Antonio Barrera's greatest achievements, while others still speculate what could have been of Naseem Hamed's career if he didn't retire early. Naseem Hamed was just entering his 30s, often considered the prime of a fighter's career, and despite the loss, people were still expecting Naseem Hamed to have a longer, more prolific career. His early retirement also meant he missed out on the chance to fight some notable fighters in the same weight class like Manny Pacquiao, Miguel Cotto, or Ricky Hatton. In the end, one thing is clear. This fight against Marco Antonio Barrera absolutely changed the career trajectory of Naseem Hamed. And that's all for today's video. What's your favorite Naseem Hamed fight and moment? Write your answers down in the comments, and while you're at it, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications on the newest videos on the best sports content.